Hey guys, it's Tara Marie. We're here in the Hangar Studios. We're about to do my podcast, Tara Marie Live. I'm here with Dr. Vincent Pedre. He's the author of this book, Happy Gut. And in this book, he teaches how to get optimal gut health in 28 days. Isn't that right?
That's it.
Absolutely. Stick around. We're going to be talking about Happy Gut, everything you've ever wanted to know about gut health. I'll be right back. I'm Tara Marie, and I'm a fitness expert, personal trainer, and motivational strategist. Optimal health is achieved when you're balanced mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, and spiritually. My goal is to bring you information that will help you be the best version of you. Well, hello and welcome to Tara Marie Live, and thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Tara Marie Segundo. I'm a fitness expert, a personal trainer, and a motivational strategist, and we're broadcasting today from the Hangar Studios right here in New York City. Now, Tara Marie Live is a podcast about mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual health, and how these parts of us are intertwined and all have to be nurtured to achieve optimal health. Now, today we have a show that applies to everybody, even little children. In the world in which we live, we're dealing with a food supply that can make us very sick unless we have information as to how to protect ourselves and navigate through the grocery stores that are filled with foods and what I like to call food-like products that are loaded with sugar, artificial sweeteners, food dyes, chemical food additives and preservatives, herbicides, pesticides, high fructose corn syrup, and genetically modified organisms. Food can be our greatest source of nourishment, but can also be our greatest source of inflammation in the body. And as we've discussed before on this show, inflammation is the foundation of all disease. So food can either function as medicine or it can function as poison, depending on what you choose to put in your body and how your body reacts to it. We often eat with reckless abandon, giving absolutely no thought to what we're doing to the integrity of our gastrointestinal system. We're also not considering that when our gastrointestinal system is not healthy, we cannot be healthy physically or even mentally. Nobody understands this better than my guest today, and he's an expert in this field who has dedicated his life as a physician to educating people on how to get healthy and stay healthy by way of optimizing their gut health. So please welcome my guest, Dr. Vincent Pedre, seen very frequently in the media and known in the wellness community as The Bridge. Dr. Vincent Pedre is the author of Happy Gut, the cleansing program to help you lose weight, gain energy, and eliminate pain. He approaches healing by bridging the strengths of both Eastern and Western methodology. And as a medical expert, Dr. Pedre has appeared on Dr. Oz, Good Morning America, Fox News, The Martha Stewart Show, The Early Show, Sirius XM's Doctor Radio, and Healthy Living on ABC News. He's also a regular contributing writer to Mind Body Green. I love it. It's a leading health and wellness blog. He's a board-certified internist, functional medicine certified practitioner, and medical director of Pedre Integrative Health, his private practice right here in New York City. He's also a clinical instructor at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine and certified in yoga and medical acupuncture. So welcome to you, Dr. Vincent Pedre.
Thanks for having me.
That should make
I
you
realize like the litany of things I've done, and that doesn't even have that I'm faculty for the Institute for Functional Medicine now.
Yeah, where is that? Where is the Institute for Functional Medicine?
They're based out of Seattle, but they teach all over the country. So they teach continuing medical education to other practitioners, and I officially became faculty at the end of last year.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, and they don't really take on a lot of new faculty, so it's a big honor.
Well, but
to be
I
part
can
of that.
I can understand why they brought you on, because it's like it said in the bio, you are kind of the bridge because you are an MD. He's a medical doctor. A lot of I work
and I'm bilingual.
You're bilingual because you're Cubano.
Yeah. So they initially. The reason they brought me on was for their Latin American market. So I actually my first teaching gig with them was in Peru, in Lima, Peru.
I read that in one of your bios because I was submitted a lot of information. Yes, you did. You taught in Peru, so you can teach in.
Yeah. Even though it's not as easy as conversational Spanish.
Medical, right. Medical
but I think that endeared me to the audience because I relied on them to help me a little bit with the medical Spanish. But we had a good time, and then I went and taught in Mexico last year.
Oh.
In Mexico City, and that went great. And now they've asked me to go to Australia. I did that last year as well.
Oh, yes. And aren't you doing that coming up soon?
I'm going back to Peru in April to teach again for them. And now officially, because I'm faculty, I'm also teaching in the U.S. Because initially they brought me in as international faculty.
Okay.
And I was like, I love that because I love to travel and I love going to different cultures and seeing different people. I'd never been to Latin America before, like Peru.
Now, are you primarily, is the crux of your teaching what you basically teach in because I know that this is your specialty, right?
When I teach for the Institute, I'm teaching around my strengths.
Okay.
So a lot of it is teaching practitioners about gut health, but also using the methodology of functional medicine to figure out underlying root causes of disease, which is what I teach. You know, I take that and I teach that to the layperson in my book.
Yes. And this is, okay, so people listening on the podcast, obviously we're also simulcasting, we're doing a video. You guys check out this book. This is Happy Gut. This is a book. When you're done hearing this podcast or watching this video, this is a book you're going to want to run out and buy. I read it, Doctor. I told you from cover to cover. Literally, I started at page 1 and I read every page of the book. I think it's very, very reader friendly.
Thank you.
But it's also packed with a lot of information. And this is one of those books, and I can say this as someone who did read it from cover to cover. I think you do best with this book if you first read it all the way through, but then there's a lot of reference material.
I think you have to capture the
essence,
the entire philosophy behind it, because I think what happens a lot of times with people is that they will segment a book.
Yes.
And they'll say, well, what is the diet program? And then they just go for the diet and let me see what I should be eating.
Right.
But then they don't get the whole philosophy.
Crux. Yeah.
Because as you started your podcast talking about like mind, body, spirit, like that is my approach to health has always been you've got to heal at multiple levels in order to heal the body. And yes, you need to heal your gut at the essential level of nutrition.
Correct. Yeah.
And maybe the right supplements to help the gut lining heal. But you also have to cleanse your mind of negativity and you've got to get yourself into more of a relaxed state.
Yes.
Because you cannot heal if you're stressed.
And one of the things, and one of the reasons, full disclosure, the reason I wanted to interview you was because I started following you on social media. We started following each other, and I loved everything you posted. I also happen to love Mind Body Green, so the fact that you write a lot for them, and so and I like the reason I got involved doing what I do is because my training is in exercise physiology. So I'm trained in the physical body. As I worked as a personal trainer, things like that. It wasn't very soon after I got out of graduate school and was really working in a detailed way, one-on-one with people, that I realized that what I was doing really had a lot more to do with reps and sets and rest periods and cholesterol and triglycerides, because I figured out I was dealing with like a lot of stressed out, angry people. And then we couldn't figure out why, you know what I mean? So that's where I came up with mental, emotional, physical, social, spiritual. You can't have a disaster of a relationship and be pissed off and have a healthy body. You can't have a body that's falling apart and be happy in your life.
Well, you're not going to take care, either way, like if you're trying to take care of your body, but you're not happy in your life, whether it's your personal situation or your job, then you're not really going to give to yourself the 100% effort that you need.
I believe that.
And I'll have to say, even I see a lot of people who have severe gut dysfunction from maybe years of antibiotics or for other reasons. Stress can be a major factor.
Yep.
And sometimes you can be doing everything right. It looks like you're doing everything right, but you're still living a stressed life. And I tell people there are 3 pillars to healing the gut.
Okay.
The first is diet.
Yeah.
Right. The second one is the right supplements. So a lot of times you need kind of like that extra assist with the supplements. And then the third one is stress management. And to me, it's the elephant in the room, because a lot of times you go to doctor and they don't talk about that. They don't talk about, well, how is your work, your stress at work affecting your gut? Or how is the stress in your life affecting? Yeah, it could be anything. Because there could be conflict in your life. I mean, how many times when someone's in conflict, they might tell you, I have a pit in my stomach.
I
or I've
get
got
that.
butterflies in my stomach. Well, we feel things through the gut or the intestinal system. We call it the second brain, but I almost think that maybe it should be reversed, that it's the first brain. And this is our second brain up here.
You actually talk about that in the book. You talk about how the gastrointestinal tract has its own nervous system. It's called the enteric nervous system, but it's called like the second brain.
And it evolved to act independently from the rest of our nervous system. So it can help food move through. But if you think about it, that's where we feel things. Your intuition comes through there. And a lot of times your intuition is telling you one thing and your brain is analyzing.
Yes.
And it's maybe over-analyzing and you're ignoring your intuition.
The gut instinct.
So a lot of times what I tell people is that I'm just a body interpreter for you, because the people that I see, a lot of them don't know how to listen to their bodies. So part of what I do is teach them how to start becoming more in tune with their body. Because a lot of times they're eating foods that are making them sick, but they're just not aware of it.
Yes.
So they come in, they're like, well, I don't know what to do. Everything makes me ill. But you have to start breaking it down and being much more aware of, when you eat this, how do you feel? Like, be really aware of what happens each time.
Have you noticed this, doctor? Because I noticed this as a trainer. A lot of people, and I never noticed this till I moved to New York. I don't know if it's like a New York phenomenon, but a lot of people are sort of unaware of themselves from the neck down. I don't know if it's deliberate or if it's just because people start to live in their heads. But like you're talking about...
I think that, because we talk about the gut.
The gut feelings.
But there is a cellular memory of things, right? We talk about muscle memory. Right, your muscles remember how to do certain things, like riding a bike. Once that's in there,
that's why practice makes
But at the same token, there is cellular memory as well that gets embedded. Emotions get embedded in your body, and if you ever ask a person this question, usually you stump them. Like if you ask them, "Well, where in your body do you feel your anxiety?" and they have to stop. And a lot of times there's silence for a moment because they've never thought of it that way. Like, I'm like, yeah, when you feel anxious, close your eyes. Tell me where in your body does that anxiety live? Because that is also the key to healing, because then you breathe into that part. You bring the breath, because the breath, the deep breath, is how we activate the parasympathetic nervous system. And we know that you need to relax to digest.
Yes.
But I really think you have to relax to heal.
Definitely. Get back with the second brain thing. The second brain is in constant communication with the brain in our heads.
There are more neurons. There are the vagus nerve, which comes from the brain and innervates everything from the lower third of the esophagus down the entire GI tract, including all the different organs. Okay. It's called the vagus, as in like vago in Spanish, which means lazy.
Okay, V-A-G-U-S.
So because it's such a long, it's almost like a lazy river going through the body. But it has actually, most of the nerves are actually sending signals back to the brain. So 70 to 85% of the nerves in the vagus are actually sending a signal from your organs back to your brain.
Okay, so what's happening in the gut is also affecting the brain.
It's affecting the brain, and vice versa. Because if you have a traumatic brain injury, so say you fall, you have a concussion, you're knocked out. So if you're knocked unconscious, within 30 minutes of that, the vagus nerve becomes dysfunctional. You start losing the pulse from the brain down the vagus, and you develop leaky gut syndrome.
Really? I did not know that.
So any person who ends up in the hospital with a traumatic brain injury is going to become extremely inflamed and toxic, because within an hour, their gut is very leaky, and it's allowing something called endotoxin to get into the circulation. And then it just becomes this vicious cycle, because now your gut is inflamed and your brain is inflamed because you just got knocked out.
Now,
and that's the reverse. So we see that the gut affects the brain, but the brain also affects the health of the gut.
Now let's back it up. Let's take it from the beginning. When you refer to the gut, just explain to people exactly what part of the anatomy we're referring to, because it's more than just the stomach.
Yeah, the gut has become a very broad term to mean the entire digestive system. And you could even think of it as, I think of it more, not this part, not the throat, but starting with the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine. And that to me is the gut. And you could even expand it and say, the associated organs like the liver, the gallbladder. But it's funny because when we were coming up with the title of the book,
Happy Gut.
Happy Gut, gut wasn't really a colloquial term at the time.
Because wasn't it published first in 2015, correct?
2015, yeah. And it was around that time that the gut was becoming, and I told my PR person that by the time this book is published, we're going to make gut a household word.
Well, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, you certainly did.
And now you see it in a lot of books, like the word gut is included. So I think before, if anybody said gut, they were talking about like a beer belly, look at my gut.
So basically, when you refer to gut, and when we refer to gut
we're
on this
talking
program,
about that internal system, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine.
Now, you particularly, you've dedicated your life as a doctor to this, but a long time before you became a doctor. I mean, when you were a little kid, you were introduced to the gut, not in a good way, and that persisted even through medical school. Tell your story, because I think that's an interesting. I understand why you're so passionate about it.
I would say that when I was growing up, I considered it my crux. That I had a very sensitive, weak digestive system.
Even as a little boy.
Even as a little boy, yeah. It manifested in different ways, like butterflies in my stomach before a test, or before I used to play the piano, so before performances. And later on, with a lot of upset stomach, if I was emotionally upset about something. What I didn't realize is I was a very sensitive child. And what I was experiencing through my gut was my sensitivity and the way I sense the world.
Yeah.
Because the gut is about safety. And some of the intelligence that we get from the gut is, are we safe or are we not safe? So if you're walking down the street and suddenly you see somebody, before they're close to you, you might already be sensing, I don't feel safe with this person approaching me. That's your gut is feeling that. It's like that gut feeling.
That's happened in New York to me. Has it ever happened to you? That's happened to me.
I feel like it probably has. Yeah. And it's kind of like a protective mechanism. And if you think about it, the gut is our border patrol with the outside world that comes inside of us. So all the food that's coming through, all the bugs that are in the food, the bacteria, the yeast, potentially parasites. So our gut is a border patrol when it comes to that. But going back to my childhood, at some point, and I don't know where, you go to the pediatrician. I was growing up back in the 70s and 80s, and it was very much the practice to give antibiotics for almost any cold.
Yes, I will corroborate that.
And I kept getting sick. And they would tell my mom I had a very weak immune system. And this is even, I even think of this now, and thank God that I didn't get anything from this, but I used to get gamma globulin shots.
Oh, to increase gamma globulin.
Yeah. And these were, gamma globulin shots came from pooled blood, probably from multiple donors. And this was before the HIV epidemic. So we didn't know about, I thank God that I didn't get something from that.
Just to clarify, you were given the gamma globulin shots to raise your antibodies.
To give me more antibodies so I could fight off the infection, because the belief was that my immune system was weak.
Okay.
So I was on multiple rounds of antibiotics. Now I can look back and realize that I developed a reaction and sensitivity to the two biggest food groups in my diet, which were wheat, which is also gluten, and dairy. So there was cereal with milk in the morning. There was probably a sandwich. Maybe there was Cuban bread at dinner. My grandmother was constantly baking me cakes. There was flan, which is like an egg custard.
Café con leche, which is milk with a little bit of coffee. Yeah.
There was a lot of that in my diet, and because of the antibiotics, which cause a change in my microbiome. If you look at it, I was getting probably 2 or 3 rounds of antibiotics per year.
10-day rounds?
Yeah, probably like 7 days, 10 days. And each round of antibiotics takes you 6 to 12 months to recover from.
I believe
So
that.
before my microbiome was recovering from a round of antibiotics, I was getting another round. And what does that lead to? It leads to leaky gut syndrome or increased gut permeability.
Before we carry on, define to the audience what you mean by the microbiome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So there are many microbiomes. So it's the world that lives on our skin. It's the world of microbes. It lives on our skin. It lives in the palms of it actually lives in the creases of the hand.
Okay.
It doesn't live. It's almost like between the creases of our hands is almost like a desert. There's no microbes there, but then you go into the creases and it's populated by microbes. They live inside the mouth, inside the nose, the nasal passages, and then the
Ears,
biggest
vagina,
everywhere.
rectum,
yeah. And the gut is the biggest reservoir out of all of those microbiomes. It's the largest one, especially in the large intestine where we have about 100 trillion bacteria. Anywhere between 400, I mean, you can only guess because we still can't test for everyone, but 400 to maybe 700 different species in a person of different microbes. And there's always probably some parasites. There's yeast in there.
Okay.
And it's almost like, if you think about it, it's like the Amazon rainforest inside. Or sometimes I tell people that it's like your own personal galaxy because you have 100 trillion organisms. The Milky Way, by comparison, has 400 billion stars.
Okay.
So we have more bacteria in our gut than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Like, just think about that for one moment. Like, you're carrying this world that has been passed on from human to human for centuries.
And to be clear, from your perspective as a physician, there's an ideal microbiome, meaning a microbiome that has a healthy population of good and bad bacteria.
Right. And that's the key to say, is that a healthy microbiome is not like they're all good.
Okay.
A healthy microbiome is going to have some of the so-called bad bugs, but there is a balance. There's an order. So diversity is what makes the microbiome healthy. And when you're on antibiotics,
let's go back to your
like
story
that,
as a child.
Then what happens is the diversity of the gut gets narrowed. So you have a much narrower representation of bacteria, and then it has to repopulate over time. But what we know is that there's some key to health that happens from having this varied community in there. And the more varied it is, the better it is for us. And of course, the more of the good guys, you want a balance where the predators aren't taking over your rainforest, your little gut garden.
But as a child now, so you're a little boy, you're given on average 2-3 times a year. So, like, as you said,
and I'm a teenager now, and
you'd no sooner get over one than you'd be given
because what happens is that your gut microbiome, your probiotic bacteria, help regulate your immune system. And we haven't talked about that yet, but 70% of the immune system is all along the gut lining.
70%. Okay.
So that's a huge representation of the immune system. That also means that if there's anything coming through the gut, if there's any inflammation in the gut, then the immune system there is going to send a system-wide alert to the rest of your body and tell your body you're inflamed. So thus, why autoimmune disease, a lot of it, they think, is connected to the gut, or actually begins by a dysregulation of the immune system in the gut that then causes your body to then start reacting to other parts.
Okay, so you're a little kid. And by the way, when I read your book, I felt like maybe we were from the same family because same thing. Because I'm slightly older than you, 53, but we were raised in the same era when I was a little kid. Even you think they were giving antibiotics to you guys, they were passing out antibiotics like they were candy to my in my world. I was born in 1965. Every time you complain of an ear infection or anything goes wrong, they give you antibiotics. So I was with you. I was given antibiotics all the time.
And to clarify, what they found in the early 2000s through studies is that giving kids antibiotics for ear infections is not required. That most of them are viral in nature and that they resolve on their own. So when I had my son in 2004, we raised him pretty much free of, we didn't give him any antibiotics for infections, obviously keeping a very close eye on him, making sure that he was safe if he had a high fever. But he didn't have his real first round of antibiotics was when he was 7, when he had a very clear sinus infection that needed antibiotics.
Right. And that is how antibiotics
But if you think about it, it takes about the first 5 years of life to develop the microbiome, from the infant microbiome to the microbiome in the gut that starts to resemble the adult microbiome. So it's a very key developmental stage. So what if you give a kid at 2 years old antibiotics when they're trying to, develop their gut microbiome diversity? And then you're raising that kid in an atmosphere of super hygiene, using antimicrobial wipes and
soap.
All this stuff that is not good for our kids and for the microbiome, because we need to be out and getting dirty and playing in dirt, and that's partly what creates microbial diversity.
Right.
In the body, is we're not really. I mean, we're not meant to be
sterile.
Sterile, it's not. It's not good for. It's not even good for the skin of the hand. I mean, the FDA found that triclosan in these antibacterial soaps was bad for our bodies.
And triclosan is in a lot of toothpaste. So yeah. But not to get off course. But what was interesting about you was, so you're not the healthiest little kid. You're given all these antibiotics. You're fed like I am. My mother gave me milk every day. She thought it was the right thing to do.
Oh my gosh. But think about the Dairy Council.
Yeah, we were taught. Yeah, you need strong bones.
Milk does. Milk does your body good. Milk makes your bones strong. But we know now that milk actually is not good for the bones. At least the research is questionable there. And what's really good for building strong bones are vegetables.
Yeah, with natural sources of calcium.
With calcium, but because they're alkaline, so they help keep the bones strong. So, I mean, imagine, I used to request a milkshake on the way home from elementary school every day.
But it's because what you were programmed to do.
Yeah.
And so you grow up, so you tell the story now. Now you're in medical school, and you develop what you think, what you're told is IBS. You're told that.
Right.
Correct? And that I had a similar experience when I was in college. When I was in college was when I started putting the pieces together. It was when I realized it's not normal to have dark circles under my eyes and a snotty nose all the time. Maybe it has something to do with the milk I drink every day. So I started putting the pieces together around the same age. So how did things fare for you?
Well, when I went to medical school, I just coincidentally, not without too much intention, reduced my dairy intake. Just because I was rushing to classes in the morning. So I couldn't sit and eat a bowl with cereal. So I took dairy out, and I noticed that I stopped getting sick as often. And that was if there was any life goal at that time as a teenager and then going into medical school, was to figure out, how can I not get sick every time I'm around somebody who's sick? So I was always trying to see, well, is it something I'm eating? Is it something environmental? So I realized, not having milk as much as I was, that I wasn't as mucousy, so I didn't pick up every virus. And thus, I started making the connection with nutrition. And even though I was in medical school where they teach you barely any nutrition, I was always, I just grew up in a family where even though I was eating the wrong things, there was a philosophy that nutrition was the key to health, like figuring out nutrition. My father was obsessed with, he had done a blood test to check his food reactions. And we had on the refrigerator, he put up a list of all the foods he could eat and all the foods he couldn't eat. And at one point, he put up a list with skull and crossbones of all the restaurants that we should never eat at, which included all the fast food chains and the pizza chains and all that. And you look at that as a kid and you think like, oh, my dad is crazy. This is really funny. And we would just laugh it off. But I think some of it sunk in.
Yeah.
And when I finally started cooking for myself in medical school, and you could see that I felt so much healthier when I was making my own food.
Well, how did you figure out the wheat connection? Because you talk about how...
That took way longer.
Okay.
That took way long. I started suspecting it when I was in residency.
Okay.
When I had moved to New York and I was in residency training. Just the way my gut would react, like if I had a slice of pizza, for example. But it took me learning functional medicine and understanding the ramifications, the long-term ramifications of having a gluten sensitivity. And then the fear, finally, it was the fear of developing an autoimmune disease because my mom had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And my older sister has multiple sclerosis, so 2 autoimmune diseases in my family. And at that time, with my sensitive stomach, I decided I need to figure this out.
Otherwise you were on the path to an autoimmune disease. What's interesting is because I had tons of antibiotics, milk, wheat. I was raised exactly the way you were raised. By 33, I'm diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune disorder of the thyroid. It's a hypothyroidism.
And they also think that Hashimoto's starts in the gut.
I believe you 100%.
So the initial, and I have a theory, even though it hasn't been proven, that because the Hashimoto's antibodies, so the proteins that the body becomes reactive to in Hashimoto's, are inside the cells of the thyroid.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, well, why would we be exposed to intracellular proteins that should not be out in circulation so our immune system can see them and attack? And I think that you get what I think eventually we'll figure out is we get a leaky thyroid because of a leaky gut. Gluten is connected because gluten gets broken down by an enzyme called tissue transglutaminase.
Okay, so gluten gets broken down
by tissue transglutaminase. So if you imagine, it's a little science lecture here. The lining of the gut is 1 cell layer thick, right? And on the other side of that lining is something called the lamina propria.
Okay.
To me, the lamina propria is like the neutral zone. It's like the sampling zone. There are white blood cells that kind of hang out, they patrol, they kind of go around, tumble around and check out, hey, what's coming through? And let me try this. Is this okay, friend or foe? Okay, this is friend. I'll let the nutrient come into the body. But if gluten comes in, and gluten is a very difficult molecule to break down, so if you've developed leaky gut from, say, you've been on antibiotics, you've been stressed.
High sugar diet,
yeast overgrowth, all those things, dysbiosis, imbalance between good and bad bugs, all that can cause leaky gut. Then you get a partially digested gluten molecule, which is still in protein form.
Okay.
Because we don't react to the building blocks of protein, which are amino acids. You're not going to develop an immune reaction. You can't develop an immune reaction to anything that is, I think, less than like 6 to 9 amino acids in length. So it already has to be in protein form. So tissue transglutaminase comes and tries to gobble up gluten. Sometimes it forms what we call a chimeric molecule, where you have gluten and you have the tissue transglutaminase. And now that gets swallowed up by these cells, these white blood cells called dendritic cells, and they present it to what we call the antigen presenting cells.
Okay.
So they show this, like they put it out on a platter.
And that looks like a foreign invader.
And that cell looks at this and says, this is foreign.
Okay.
Let me react. And one side is tissue transglutaminase. The other side is gluten. Well, where is tissue transglutaminase? It's all over, and it's in the thyroid. It's in the tissue around the thyroid.
And that's how Hashimoto's is developed, do you think?
Well, so one theory why people with celiac have a higher tendency to develop Hashimoto's is you develop autoantibodies to gluten. In those autoantibodies, you can develop tissue transglutaminase antibodies. My theory is because tissue transglutaminase is in the thyroid, that it starts attacking the thyroid, and that breaks down the outer area of the thyroid. Then you get exposed to these antibodies in the thyroid. You develop what's autoimmune thyroiditis, which is Hashimoto's.
That makes sense to me, because again, I don't know about you, but my whole life in elementary, junior high, and high school was bread, wheat, bread, pizza, wheat, junk food, bread. It was
God, I love that Cuban bread.
Even through,
I look at it now and I know I don't eat
yeah.
it anymore, but I look at it and I just remember like
what was
it tasted so good.
Don't you remember, like, I remember Sundays, my mother's side is Sicilian. On Sundays when we were in town, because they all lived in Tampa, when we were in town, Sundays we would have Milanese, which is, I don't know if you know what Milanese is.
Yeah.
It's where you make a pot of spaghetti. You make a pot of spaghetti, then you put it in a pan and you bake it.
Yeah.
So it's baked spaghetti, basically, Milanese.
Yeah. With cheese on top.
With Cuban,
right?
With Cuban bread, or Mama, my grandmother, would make the Cuban bread into garlic bread, and then you'd have a salad, and then you'd have.
And you know what makes the Cuban bread taste so good?
Well, butter and garlic. That's what.
Know what they use to make it?
What?
Lard.
Okay, well, but so that was all this stuff. That was what we ate.
That's why it's so tasty.
But that was what we ate, and so it didn't shock me. And then I also ate a lot of sugar. I ate a high sugar diet. So combine that with everything, it doesn't shock me that I developed an autoimmune disease. But I will say,
and women are 8 times as prone as men to develop a autoimmune thyroid. And then you have to think about all the environmental factors, all the environmental contaminants and poisons that are out there that have grown since we were kids.
Yeah, it's a very different environment than in 1965 when I was born. But before we carry on, I want you to describe exactly what you mean by leaky gut, so people can understand because I'm sure people are thinking, like, I mean, when I think of leaky gut, I think of almost like the lining of a gut that's almost like a cheesecloth.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one way to look at it. Another way that I describe it is, so the cells that line the gut, so let's pretend these are the cells, one cell layer thick.
Which is not thick.
It's not very thick.
Yeah.
And they're connected in between by these things called tight junctions.
Junctions, okay.
These tight junctions stick together like Velcro.
Okay, in a healthy gut.
In a healthy gut. But when you have a leaky gut, because you lose all the things that help support a healthy gut, so maybe you're losing the good bacteria and you have some bad bugs that are inflammatory, or you had an ache in your knee and you took ibuprofen. Well, that also causes an increase in gut permeability. Or you're eating a lot of gluten, and we know that gluten can increase gut permeability or stress or alcohol. And what happens is a molecule, it's a signal molecule inside the cell called zonulin, gets stimulated by things like gluten. And zonulin...
What about sugar, doctor? Sugar too?
Well, sugar not directly, but sugar can cause an imbalance by allowing for yeast overgrowth.
Okay.
And yeast produces mycotoxins.
Okay.
And those also are bad for the gut lining. So this Velcro, when zonulin is secreted, loosens up and opens up. So if the tight junctions are like this, you develop a leaky gut, the tight junctions get wider.
Oh.
So now things that are not supposed to be able to get through that space can get through. So something like a molecule like partially digested gluten, or it could be corn, or it could be soy. A lot of people develop food reactions to a wide range of foods. And it's not that the food itself is always bad. It's that the gut has become leaky and they're getting exposed to a protein that they shouldn't be seeing. If the gut was not leaky, if the gate is closed,
it would
then
stay
everything,
in the line. Yeah.
everything is getting digested here inside the gut.
Okay.
Right?
So basically, it's kind of an increased permeability in the gut lining, where you don't want permeability.
Otherwise, things are getting through. They're just going through ion channels and things. So we're absorbing minerals, we're absorbing sugars, we're absorbing amino acids, but they're not going through the tight junction. They're actually going through the cell, but they're gaining passage through portals, through these channels.
Because the junctions are becoming less tight.
Because the junctions are tight. So all the nutrients, the little micronutrients, they get absorbed through the cell. What happens when you get a leaky gut?
Yeah.
When the junction widens?
Yes.
You're getting big molecules coming in, but the absorptive surface starts to deteriorate. So the surface area to be able to absorb these molecules gets reduced, especially in a disease like celiac disease, which is the extreme. You lose all these little villi that create basically a big surface area. It's like a shag rug
Okay.
inside the intestines. So if that shag rug then becomes flat, you don't have as much surface area. You can't absorb your nutrients. So now you're malnourished.
Oh, that's why people with Crohn's disease lose so much weight, correct? They just get so skinny, and yeah.
They lose weight. Their hair might not grow
Yeah.
well. Like, so it affects many other things because of the the micronutrient deficiency.
So, doctor, so leaky gut, we'll call it an increased permeability in the gut. You say in the book that reasons that people develop leaky gut are antibiotics that we've already discussed, dysbiosis, which explain the word dysbiosis, please.
It just means an imbalance between good and bad bugs in the gut.
So when you get that dysbiosis, it creates the increased permeability.
Because you lose that crosstalk. So through this barrier, if you have the good bacteria, the probiotic bacteria here, they're hanging out really close to the gut lining. On the other side of the white blood cells, they're actually communicating with each other.
Okay.
So the good bacteria keep the immune system in kind of a little bit in check. So the immune system isn't overactive. It isn't underactive, but it keeps it, and it also helps keep the gut lining healthy.
Okay. So when you have dysbiosis, you have lowered immunity. And when you
your immune system might be overwhelmed, for example.
That was what was happening.
So it's almost the way I explain it is that it's almost like you're fighting it's like your body's Afghanistan. It's this constant waging battle. But if your troops are all in Afghanistan and now you have an invasion coming from another part, which might be your nose, because you just got exposed to a virus, where your immune system is all locked up here. It's fighting a war down here. So it doesn't have enough to be able to pay attention to a virus coming in.
Okay, and that's why you got sick every time somebody looked at you when you were a kid.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
So again, causes of leaky gut, antibiotics, which I think a lot of people are like you and I.
That is the number one.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't been on an antibiotic at some point in their lives?
Well, I told you before the show over in the room, I just came off a 20 days, doctor, 20 days. What happened was is I got, the last time, in 2013, I got Lyme disease, okay? I got bitten by a tick, and I had to go on 21 days of amoxicillin, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. To prevent Lyme disease, fine, I'll do it, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I talk a lot about the ill effects of antibiotics, but the truth is antibiotics save lives.
God bless, yeah.
It's just that I'm more for the judicious use of antibiotics, because I think antibiotics are often prescribed without considering the sequelae of putting someone on antibiotics. So then a lot of times I see the patients because they are paying the price for having been on antibiotics.
And that's me now, because this last 20-day round, I feel like 10 days would have been enough. I felt like 20 days was a bit excessive, but I did what the doctor said, because I had an infection in my mouth.
Yeah.
And I did what the doctor said.
And honestly, you don't want to mess with that because it could get into your bone.
It could, yeah.
But there are things that you can do to not help your gut while you're on antibiotics, and then help your gut recover after antibiotics.
This is a great question that I'm just thinking of. I'm sure people are thinking it. When I'm physically on antibiotics, I was always told, don't take probiotics while you're on antibiotics because you're just going to get killed with the antibiotics. I usually start antibiotics like the day before, the day or two. Like if I have 2 more days on antibiotics, I'll start probiotics then. Do you have an opinion about that?
There's different ways to look at it. And one thing I would say is there's a probiotic yeast that you can take. It's called Saccharomyces boulardii. Also known, there's some brands out there like Florist Store, for example, which is available over the counter. And since it's a yeast organism, it can't be killed by the antibiotic. So you can take it at the same time as the antibiotic. And many studies have shown that Saccharomyces helps. It basically lines the lining of the gut and protects it so that it actually can help protect you from developing leaky gut while you're on an antibiotic.
So you're taking yeast, because doesn't yeast create yeast?
But this is a friendly yeast. So this yeast actually is not pathogenic for the body. It doesn't cause disease.
It's not like Candida.
No, so it's not pathogenic. It actually is healing. So they've used it, for example, in Europe for like an acute diarrhea. It can help heal the gut from the diarrhea.
What is that called, doctor?
It's called Saccharomyces. Saccharomyces.
Saccharomyces. All right. So again.
So you can do that, and then there's the other thing that a lot of people don't think about is mitochondrial dysfunction from being on antibiotics.
How would that affect the mitochondria?
The mitochondria are the little energy factories. There's hundreds of them in every muscle cell.
Yeah.
Thousands in heart muscle tissue. But every single cell in the body needs mitochondria. If you don't have energy factories, your body can't function well. A lot of neurological disease is a mitochondrial issue.
Okay.
But if you look at evolutionarily, mitochondria were probably a bacteria that got swallowed into what became mammalian cells, and it's a symbiosis. The big cell provides the nutrients the mitochondria needs, and in return, the mitochondria generates ATP, which is for energy.
Yeah.
But a lot of mitochondria are susceptible to antibiotics because of their likeness to bacteria. Because if you look at their evolution, they probably originated as bacteria, but then got brought in intracellularly.
So when you have to take antibiotics, that's why you're tired at the gym afterwards. Like you
And especially with certain types of antibiotics like fluoroquinolones, people know them as Cipro, for example, Levaquin, that can make you really tired. And in an older person, it can cause a psychosis. Well, it's basically causing your mitochondria to die.
Is there recouping those, doctor?
There's a nutrient that a lot of times we might use if we're doing heavy-duty antibiotics. It's NAC, so N-acetylcysteine, but short. It's for NAC. NAC increases intracellular glutathione. Glutathione is the body's main detox molecule, and it's basically an antioxidant and helps protect the mitochondria. So if you give NAC with an antibiotic, you can actually protect the mitochondria from the effects of the antibiotic.
That's interesting. And you can buy NAC. That's an amino acid. You can buy that. Probably Jarrow makes it. You can buy that at the health food store.
You can buy any health food store will have NAC.
Now, so would you venture to guess? Because I'm looking at the way people eat. I'm looking at and I'm just talking in this country. Obviously, this is a podcast. Everybody all over the world sees this, but everything's so westernized. When I was 19, I went to Japan, and it was just like, it was.
I was just in Japan last year,
it's
and
kind of ridiculous.
They're drinking a lot of coffee, and there's fast food, and
McDonald's on it.
And there's a lot of like refined products. Like they're very much into croissants, and like a lot of Western foods are becoming prominent there. Even though there's still, I have to say, Japan still has a very rich cultural tradition, but you can see how how American culture is there's Starbucks everywhere.
Not in a good way. Not in a good way.
Not in a good way, because there's a lot of diabetes and prediabetes and
But would you venture to guess that most people have some level of leaky gut, some level of gut dysbiosis? Wouldn't you venture to guess?
Anybody who's been on antibiotics,
Okay.
And a lot of practitioners that practice the way that I do, it just after years, you just assume that when patients come in, they probably have leaky gut.
Okay.
Because if they're an adult, they've been on antibiotics at least a couple of times. And if you're not eating a healthy diet, if you're eating lots of refined foods,
the way
refined sugars, and you're going out and drinking a couple of nights a week, and maybe you're taking some ibuprofen for a hangover, or you're taking ibuprofen because you're achy, so it's a perfect storm. All the combination of things, and even stress increases the permeability of the gut. So stress itself, if you're under constant high stress, that also causes leaky gut.
Now, so the symptoms of dysbiosis are things like recurrent diarrhea or constipation, gas, bloating, indigestion, feeling of excessive fullness after meals.
Yeah.
If somebody hears that and says, well, I don't have any of those, I mean, do you think that perhaps they're just not paying attention?
They might not pay a lot of times people, one thing I've noticed is that sometimes people don't know they have a symptom until the symptom is no longer there.
Yeah.
Then they realize, oh, wow, I was really bloated. And we changed the diet. We did, gut healing stuff. And suddenly the symptoms gone. But the other thing is I call them gut-related symptoms or extra-intestinal symptoms. So they might not have gut symptoms, but maybe they're mentally foggy. Maybe they don't have good attention. Maybe their joints are achy.
Okay. Okay.
I had a patient from India that came in to see me who presented with a wide range of autoimmune antibodies, inflammatory markers. She had migrating joint pains, like her elbow would hurt, then it would move to her knee and move around her body. And people were wanting, or other doctors wanted to put her on steroids, which we know is not good. Oh, dear God,
yeah.
Or they wanted to put her on a biologic, which is pretty heavy-duty immunosuppressant medication. And I really questioned her carefully. She had no gut symptoms.
None. She's one of these people.
No gut symptoms. And yet, with everything that I'm talking to you about, like I understood that it was very likely that she had some sort of gut imbalance that was causing her immune system to go renegade on her body. So I did stool studies. I looked at her gut, even though she completely denied,
discounted it, yeah,
any gut symptoms. And by then, she actually, when she came in to see me, she had hives as well.
Okay, so then she had skin symptoms, yeah.
So now it had, and a lot of time, hives is usually gut related, or it may be food related, like a reaction to a food that's aggravating the immune system. I've seen gluten cause hives. I've seen dairy cause hives. You know, things that you just don't think. You know, you go to a dermatologist and they give you a steroid or they give you a cream for it. They're treating the outside, but they're not treating the inside out. So I did an analysis and found, and now she came from India, so I was thinking, you know, maybe she has a parasite. Turns out she had yeast overgrowth, she had candida, and she had 2 parasites.
But no symptoms in her, no abdominal.
No symptoms.
No diarrhea.
Nothing. No symptoms whatsoever. But she was showing all these outside the gut symptoms. And so we treated her, we refined the diet. We made sure to take sugar out of the diet because of the yeast overgrowth. Now, she had been on antibiotics as a child, so there were many reasons why she might have developed this and then promoted it because rice was very big in the diet. White rice and bread and stuff. So all that promotes the growth of yeast because it's all refined carbohydrates. It breaks down into sugar. So we treated her with antiparasitic. We controlled the yeast population, gave her antifungal, and her joint pains disappeared.
All the joint pain.
She felt better.
Did she have headaches? Just curious. Did she have any headaches or anything?
No, it was more like joint pains. And of course, I know since you had Lyme, I always rule out, because Lyme is a great imitator and could do a lot of things. But no, she had more the skin symptoms and the joint pains, the joint swelling.
And so that again.
But no gut symptoms, which is a really big, important take-home message because there's so many people out there who have symptoms that they think are not related to their gut. It could be asthma, it could be allergies, it could be migraines.
Headaches, yeah.
Headaches. It could be autoimmune disease.
Mental fog.
Yes, all those things.
You even talk about ADHD and ADD in children and adults, and depression.
Even anxiety and depression could be a gut dysbiosis, or it could be, like even in a child with behavior issues, they might have an imbalance. Maybe they have overgrowth of yeast in their gut.
Yeah, you specifically say in the book that after years and years in practice, you've seen how gut imbalances trigger behavioral, emotional, and even psychiatric symptoms.
Yeah. And mood disorders, because say you're eating too much sugar, which is causing an overgrowth of bad bugs, especially yeast in your gut. Well, that's going to put you're going to be full of all the byproducts of yeast overgrowth, the mycotoxins, and those mess with your brain. So that can increase anxiety. You might have an imbalance we now know that there are certain, this is really crazy. Like there's a strain of bacteria in the gut called Clostridia. A lot of people know it as C. diff. Like you can get C. diff diarrhea in the hospital if you're really sick. But we all have Clostridia in our gut. But if you get an overgrowth of certain types of Clostridia, they can produce a certain metabolite that is a precursor that then it's basically creates a co-metabolite because the bacteria produces the precursor, then our body's enzyme converts it into the final metabolite.
Okay.
This one is called HPHPA. It's hydroxyphenyl hydroxypropionic acid.
And it does what?
It basically blocks the enzyme that metabolizes dopamine in the brain. So you get a dopamine excess in the brain.
Okay.
Dopamine excess causes paranoia. It can even cause schizophrenia, but it can also cause like just a lot of anxiety.
I have to say this right now to my director. Okay, so Rich and I shot a special called Inside Food Addiction. And this was a 500-pound man who just eats bad food all day. I mean, the worst of the worst. And one of the things that Rich and I both noticed was he has, don't you agree, Rich? I mean, extreme anxiety and just paranoia, if you will.
And just think the sugar also puts you in this,
yeah.
You're in this constant high and then you crash off of the sugar and you get, as the sugar, if you're used to riding high on sugar, as the sugar comes crashing down, then you start getting irritable and you have a short temper. And then, but what do you need? You need another hit of sugar. So then you have something else. You have a refined carbohydrate, and then boom, you're back on the roller coaster.
I hope what people get from this is, instead of looking at their bodies as, am I fat? Am I not fat? Think about more like, because now you're making me think of all the psychiatric and emotional issues that this gentleman has. Don't you agree, Rich? Absolutely. I mean, he has psychiatric and emotional issues.
And we're also not even getting into how the microbiome, the gut microbiome, produces neurotransmitters.
Well, that is something I wanted to bring up because it says, you state in the book that there's a deep connection between our gut and how happy we feel, because you say 95% of our serotonin, the neurotransmitter that's our happy hormone, is produced in the gut. So the gut has everything to do with brain chemistry. And look at don't you agree?
More serotonin receptors in the gut than in the brain. And we know that, for example, lactobacillus, which is what we can get from fermented food like kefir, like yogurt.
Sauerkraut in the refrigerator.
Lactobacillus produces GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It calms things down. It helps you feel, less agitated.
And so basically, the gut environment has everything to do with brain chemistry. Doctor, I think we're worried about the wrong things. Everybody's worried about, how do I look? Do these genes fit? We should be worried about what's going on in here. Yeah. Because it's gonna. If
you heal your gut, then you can heal the rest of your body. Unless the one exception I will say in terms of brain chemistry is someone who's been exposed to mold, like a moldy house, and is susceptible to mold toxins.
Okay.
Then those are very inflammatory for the brain. And you have to do, in those patients, you not only have to heal the gut, which gets affected in the immune system, but you also have to really work on healing the brain, because the brain gets very inflamed. Like if you ever see someone who's mold toxic, they can even have trouble stringing sentences together or word recall. Like it's almost like
they would
their brain
almost show up as almost like a learning disabled child.
Their brain starts to malfunction. It's almost like they almost start acting as if they have like a low grade dementia, but they don't, because I've seen these patients in their 30s and their 40s, like young patients, and those you have to deal with both the brain and the gut at the same time. And there's a lot of times, but the key is, I think the message is that most of the time, if there is disease and there's symptoms in another part of the body, the gut also has symptoms. And if you develop a leaky gut, then you're going to develop you're going to develop a leaky blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, I wanted to. You also write about that in the book. First of all, define blood-brain barrier and define what leaky gut has to do with this, because this is big. This is huge. And I did not know that. I did not know there was a correlation.
And we know that that's the connection for a lot of people with depression is
and I've suffered from terribly with clinical depression. Did you ever suffer with depression with your gut issues? I mean, did you ever?
I did when I was in my training, when I was eating. But we also know that, for example, the wheat, gluten, gets metabolized into these substances called gluteomorphins. So it's like a morphine derivative. And what does morphine do? It's a depressant. It kind of like dumbs down your brain. but it can affect your mood. So we were talking about
blood-brain barrier.
The blood-brain
Please
barrier.
define that for, yeah.
So the blood-brain barrier is like the protected circulation of the brain. So the brain itself has its own kind of mesh or border patrol that protects it from...
I like mesh. Yeah, I like that.
It protects it from what's coming through the rest of the body. And the idea is if the gut suddenly becomes leaky, you don't want the toxins to be able to enter the brain.
Okay.
The problem is that if the gut is leaky for an extended period of time, then the brain barrier is going to start becoming leaky. And then you get something called endotoxin that gets into circulation. Endotoxin comes from bacteria in the large intestine, gram-negative bacteria. It was originally called endotoxin because the discoverer thought that it was only contained in the outer cell membrane of the bacteria. But we now know that endotoxin is also secreted by certain bacteria. So it's not just in this outer cell membrane. When they die, the bacteria releases its endotoxin.
So when you have leaky gut, which we've established probably most
you
of us do.
get more endotoxin in circulation.
Okay.
Studies have shown that rises in endotoxin in the blood precede obesity, weight gain, insulin resistance, diabetes.
Because it crosses the blood-brain barrier?
Well, no, because even as it gets into the body,
the
endotoxin is one of the most potent stimulators of the immune system. So it causes this inflammatory cascade. And the crazy thing is endotoxin gets into the brain. So this is where I want to tie it into.
What the heck happens then?
So it gets into the brain and it causes the hypothalamus to not function well because the endotoxin stimulates an inflammatory pathway in the brain.
And isn't hypothalamus where memories are organized?
Yes. So hypothalamus is kind of what controls the beginning of memory.
Okay. Cognition,
And microglia, which are the specialized troops, the white blood cells in the brain, they get activated by endotoxin.
So what is the end result? Are we talking all kinds of...
You get an inflamed brain. So you almost say, even though it's kind of a dramatic analogy, but it's like your brain is on fire. It's not literally on fire, but it's so people understand that picture of like something on fire, like it's inflamed.
When you heal the leaky gut, because that's what we're going to talk about now, you have a 28-day program in your book.
Yeah.
When you heal the leaky gut, by default, does the blood-brain barrier heal itself?
Yeah, and you can start fixing people's mood. And of course, there are certain things that are very complex. Because, the neurological system and the way mood is not just diet, even though diet is very key, but then you have to really work on your thought patterns and the way you perceive things and your
cognitive behavioral.
How you frame what your experience of life and start becoming more aware of that. But you can't even get to that level if you're in this crazy roller coaster because you're eating all the wrong foods.
But again, to allay people's fears, when you heal the gut, the blood-brain barrier will also
starts to heal.
So that's not a life sentence.
It's not a life sentence. And I think the best advice I could give people, because it gets so complex depending on what's going on. So if you're in a moldy house and you're a mold sensitive person,
I am, yeah,
then your brain is going to be inflamed from the mold, and you need to heal the brain as well through using special type, very kind of selective supplements and things. So my best advice is to tell anyone that is experiencing these symptoms, if you want to get to the root cause of what's happening, you should work with a functional medicine certified practitioner. Because the problem with Western medicine, now Western medicine has done many great things.
God bless, seriously,
and it saves lives.
Yeah.
And it really does save lives, but it doesn't do well with chronic disease. If it did, the rate of diabetes wouldn't be like 1 out of every 3 people that are being born now or are at risk for diabetes, and like the health span of children born in the 2000s is going to be shorter than their parents. So that is not right. So we're losing the battle against chronic disease.
I agree.
And where chronic disease is probably best managed, I think, is functional medicine. And it's not about us versus them, because I have the privilege. I mean, when you introduced me, you said I'm the bridge. Yeah. I did a regular Western medical training.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. You're an MD, so
I did a regular Western medical training, but I also was a very type A, very anxious person. So even before I went to medical school, I started meditating and I started doing yoga. I discovered those two things. And I started on this trajectory of kind of like a spiritual awareness and growth, and learning all these tools that for me at the time were more like I was using them for myself to help me
get through med school.
Get through medical school and be calm. I did yoga throughout medical school. I didn't realize that how much, I mean, I kind of knew, but that it was the type of doctor I wanted to become, but I didn't realize what an impact that was going to have on the type of doctor that I would be later on. So I've lived in both worlds. I mean, I went to a very evidence-based Western residency program here in New York City.
Mount Sinai.
Yeah. So I know how that world functions, but I also know how it doesn't function, where it malfunctions and it doesn't help patients. That's what really got me here, is because it's not about whether one is better than the other. For me, it's what can I do for the patient that's going to get them better.
Right.
And is not going to make them dependent on medication if I can avoid it.
Right.
So my go-to is, well, how can we manage the symptoms naturally first through diet, through maybe supplements? And if medication is needed for any reason, for example, like if you have Lyme, you're going to need an initial course of antibiotics.
Yep, did that. Yep.
But at the same token, we need to be aware of the consequences of being on an antibiotic course. And
you say in the book, again, I never want to diss Western medical doctors, because if when you need surgery, God bless Western medicine. Seriously.
Like my friend's mother just had a heart attack and suffered cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital. They resuscitated her and they put a stent in.
Yep.
And she's alive. And thank God.
Yeah, God bless
because
them. Yeah.
That's not where functional medicine shines. No. But functional medicine shines in saying, okay, what diet do we put you on now?
Right.
So that we can reverse disease, so we can make you better, we can make you healthier.
Right, because in traditional Western medicine, if you go to a doctor with many of the symptoms that people come to you with, you'll be given this to mask this symptom, this to mask this symptom, this.
Sometimes you're being given one medication to counter the effects of another medication.
Right.
And that's often done in psychiatry.
It's all symptom-based.
It's symptom-based.
Where you're more root cause-based. That's what I want to say. Now, what I want to talk about is, because this book, and I love this book, you guys, this is such a great book. Behind your approach to all gut issues is what you have. You call it the Gut Care Program. Now, CARE is an acronym for Cleanse, Activate, Restore, and Enhance. And I want to go through each of those. But what's great about this book is ultimately it's a 28-day program. You walk people step by step through the 28 days. After the 28 days, then you have another part that we'll get to. But really, if you follow this book, which really lays it out in detail. I mean, this is a very detailed book.
The book is an awareness journey.
Yeah.
So it's like becoming aware of what was really affecting you and your health.
So basically, let's go through these steps. So again, your Gut Care Program, C stands for cleanse. What's that about?
I mean, at its essence, cleanse is about removing the bad bugs in the gut, but also removing the inflammatory foods from the diet. The foods that most people react to or cause sensitivities, which means they activate a part of your immune system. Everybody knows what a food allergy is, like peanut allergy, like anybody who has kids, or pine nut allergy, you can go into anaphylaxis. That is an allergy. Like pretty much anyone who has a food allergy knows what they're allergic to. Their tongue gets tingly, or their lips
swell up, throat closes.
Right. So what I'm talking about when I say food sensitivities is it's a slower reaction that is hard for people to know that they're having, because it may lead to a headache, or it may lead to feeling achy or not feeling so great or tired.
And so basically, you list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Shall we quickly run through those?
Yeah.
These are things. This is in phase. Okay, so cleanse is phase 1 of the program.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So phase 1 of your program, you have people avoid certain things for 28 days and then reevaluate symptoms, and you do it beautifully. Like you have people. You really do ask us to be very, very aware. Probably more so than people are used to being. Honestly.
I can tell you, most people are not used to being aware. And a lot of times,
Right.
like even the recall, like if I asked you what you ate a week ago, like it's hard to remember everything. If I asked you, how did you feel when you ate that a week ago? You know, people don't remember. So if you start to kind of really, because what we're trying to do when we're doing an elimination is to map out patterns. We want to find patterns. And the thing about the body is it's a complex system. It's not always going to give you the same answer, but you have to look at which is the answer that's coming up most often.
Okay.
You know, like a lot of people, like for example, gluten, wheat, across the board, a lot of people, even if they're not quote unquote sensitive, they feel better when you take out excessive wheat from the diet.
And we should say that gluten is in wheat, rye, contaminated oats, and barley. It's not just
and spelt and in farro, and there's so many foods that have gluten in them or might be prepared with some gluten. If you're buying a soup out there, it might have some flour in it as a thickener. So you have to be really aware when you're cutting out certain foods like gluten. Corn is another one. Corn, soy, dairy.
Yeah, so you
legumes.
Got gluten, soy, corn, dairy, including eggs.
I do cut out eggs because they can be difficult to digest for some people.
Okay.
And I'll give you an example of a patient. She had done an elimination diet before she came to see me, and she had cut out everything but eggs, and she was nauseous every day.
And she was one of those, she ate eggs every morning for breakfast?
She ate eggs, but eggs hadn't ever tested positive. And that's the thing that's tricky is you don't always get a test that can tell you that you're sensitive to a food. So the gold standard is to take it out, see how you do, and then put it back in. So she had done other diets on the market that don't eliminate eggs. Okay. Then she came across my book. She had been having this symptom for years. She took and she also had she has an autoimmune disease as well. So she took eggs out of the diet, and within 4 weeks, the nausea went away. Completely. And the nausea had been with her for years. She had been to gastroenterologist after gastroenterologist, trying to figure out, again, it's not that it's their fault. Is that we don't get...
You're not taught nutrition.
We don't get nutrition education in medical school, and we really should. I mean, I had to self-teach myself nutrition, and I did it partly because I was always fascinated with it, but I also felt like I can't be false and give nutrition, because patients look to doctors for advice on everything, including nutrition. And I've seen doctors giving nutrition advice who are giving the wrong advice. I'm like, where are you, on what basis are you giving that advice? I've had doctors that I had taken a patient with an autoimmune disease that causes the backbones to tighten up.
What's that disease?
It's called ankylosing spondylitis.
You write about that in the book.
So I had put her on a gluten-free and dairy-free diet, and she was doing better and better. Like, this is the thing when you have a chronic disease like this, it can take months to resolve the inflammation
in the body. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you have celiac disease and you're gluten allergic, you have an autoimmune reaction to gluten. If you get exposed to gluten, if you're glutenized, it may take you up to 6 months to recover from that one exposure. That's if you have celiac disease. That's like an extreme case. But just to give you an example, that because people think, well, I'll just have it here and there, like I'm reducing it rather than being like, okay, I'm really doing an elimination. Yeah. I'm not going to have it. You can't cheat your body. Right. You can cheat your mind. You can be like, I'm going to limit it, and that's okay. But
and that's why you say you're very strict for 28 days. You're very strict, right?
Because what we're doing is we're creating a blank slate.
Okay. And why 28 days, doctor? That's enough time?
I felt because at the time that I was putting my book together, a lot of the programs were 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
That's not enough.
But I was realizing, like, if you look at how the immune system works, it takes up to 3 weeks to resolve, to really start to tone down the antibody reaction to foods.
Okay.
So the IgGs, which are the immunoglobulins that react to foods, they can be IgEs or IgGs, but IgGs are food sensitivities, and they have a half-life of 21 days.
And you wanted to get beyond the 21-day mark.
So when I was working with patients and even working on myself, I realized you're just at the very tip of it at 21 days. So to reintroduce a food at 21 days is premature.
Okay.
4 weeks to me is the minimum.
Okay.
And I felt I can ask anyone to do a month-long program. You can get through a month.
It's nothing. I mean, yeah.
People nowadays, I mean, sometimes you have like, oh, I can't do this for 28 days. But I think it's a nice round number. It's 4 weeks. Yeah. 4 weeks long. And my birthday is on the 28th of August. So
so it just worked.
It's a lucky number.
But so I think 28 days is reasonable. And you basically say, just do this for 28 days, and then we're going to reevaluate symptoms. And again, on the list, you say no sugar, no gluten, no milk products or eggs, no soy, corn, legumes. That was a shock. I was surprised when I read that. I must
legumes admit. because of how much gas they cause for people. So again, we're trying to really quiet down the gut. And the last one is nightshades, but I kind of caveat that for people who have like an inflammatory disorder like joint inflammation. It doesn't work for everyone. Taking out nightshades may help.
And nightshades are tomatoes, potatoes, bell peppers, and eggplant.
Yeah, exactly. All types of peppers. Okay. Chili peppers and what.
And so you basically ask people to eliminate those for 28 days. What was interesting in the book, you have before you start, you have a questionnaire that we have to take. Before you start, you take the questionnaire, and at the end of the 28 days, you take the same questionnaire.
Right.
Yeah. And you also indicate in the book.
The goal is to see in the questionnaire, ask you about symptoms that are even not gut related. Like, are you having headaches?
Right.
Do you have
what about acne?
Allergies? Yeah. Skin react, whatever it is, because there's so many other things that can happen that are outside of the gut, right? That are related to the health of your gut. I have seen so many women with acne that gets better by taking dairy out of their diet.
I'm so glad you said that, because I just saw a dermatologist who I will not give the name on Dr. Oz, she's saying, whatever you eat, it doesn't affect your acne unless you rub it on your face. She's a dermatologist, and I'm not going to say her name because I like her a lot, but I was in the middle of reading this book when I saw her say that. I was like, God.
Like, not that not that I get a lot of acne, but occasionally I will get an outbreak, and it will happen if I'm eating like over the holidays. I was eating too much chocolate and sweets.
When I see acne,
sugar is a provoker of acne.
Yeah, when I see adult acne, especially, the first thing I think is you've got something weird going on in that stomach. Yeah, because that's when I was a mess back in the 90s, when I had all those problems, and I had adult acne and all this stuff, that was when my gut was the worst. And it
causes hormonal imbalance.
And by the way, I thought you'll find this interesting. The first time I ever heard the term leaky gut was in 1991. That's a long time ago.
And that would have been in the fringes, because back then there wasn't research to back it up, and there was this that also created a rift between the more avant-garde medicine, naturopathic medicine, and Western medicine. Now, you want to go against me on leaky gut? Well, I can pull papers showing you that it exists, that it's been proven now.
But it was 1991. I was living in London, England, working, and I was really sick from digestive issues, and I went to see a homeopathic doctor.
And that was in their lore.
At 1991.
That was in their lore. I mean, they were talking about gut imbalance in naturopathic medicine from the turn of the century in the 1900s.
So I just want to say this stuff is the real deal. Now, okay, so cleanse, eliminate harmful substances like parasites, yeast, unfriendly bacteria, and all the foods that we mentioned: sugar, gluten, dairy, soy, corn, legumes, including peanuts, and the nightshades. A is activate. What's that?
Activate is about reactivating the digestive system with the right nutrients, especially digestive enzymes. Okay. So a lot of people who have leaky gut, who have a gut imbalance, they're not making the right amount of digestive enzymes. Okay. For example, a lot of people who have acid reflux, they're treated as if they're making too much acid, but really the most likely physiology, and what I see most of the time, is that they're making too little acid. So they're not
Okay.
able to break down protein in the stomach. So that protein sits there for too long.
And then it
And
comes
the acids, as the food is in the stomach, it's supposed to break down with the acid. If the stomach is not making enough acid, then the food is going to sit there not completely broken down. And as the stomach is filling with fluid, that acid is going to spill into the esophagus.
Okay.
So the acid's not strong enough to break down the food and activate the proteases, pepsin, which breaks down protein. But it's still acidic enough to make your esophagus not feel so good, and you get heartburn. And you can feel it up in your chest. You can feel it up in your throat.
Yeah, and you even talk in the book about the proton pump inhibitor, how they create dysbiosis.
Yeah.
So it's like this nasty circle. It's,
And they do so many things. I mean, we know now that proton pump inhibitors, which are medications everybody knows, like Prilosec, like the purple pill.
Nexium.
Yeah, all those over the counter now, which kind of makes me cringe that they are, you can just go to the pharmacy and buy your own. Even though they come with a warning and says don't take for more than 2 weeks before you speak with your doctor. But they also cause B12 malabsorption. They can cause calcium malabsorption, iron malabsorption, to increase the risk for osteoporosis. They found that people who take proton pump inhibitors are increased risk for pneumonia, and they are an increased risk for C. diff. We were talking about C. diff diarrhea.
C. difficile,
It can increase your risk for a C. diff infection. And
that's making
even for a bone fracture, not even osteoporosis, but even like a young person taking a proton pump inhibitor could be at increased risk for a bone fracture
because of the calcium blocking the calcium.
Yeah.
So, okay. So again, in the book, you talk about enzymes like HCl with pepsin, also other amylase, protease, lipase.
Yeah, all the different ones. And you can get comprehensive enzymes that if you are having trouble, like an example, like how do you know if you're not making enough digestive enzymes? Maybe you see undigested food particles in your stool, especially like plants, like greens and stuff. You still that they haven't been broken down properly. Well, your digestive system is not functioning properly. Or maybe your stool is kind of yellowish in color and floats. That means there's too much fat in the stool.
Yeah.
So that means you're not breaking down, you're not emulsifying and absorbing your fat. So it's getting all the way to the end and it's causing loose stool. It can cause diarrhea. So these are all signs that your digestive system is not digesting properly.
Also, you say in the book, feeling excessively full hours after a meal.
Yes. Yeah. If it's immediately after a meal, like within 30 minutes, that's usually lack of enough hydrochloric acid, so not enough acid in the stomach. If it's later on, it's because you're just not producing enough enzymes, and it could be that
protease amylase,
and it could be that you're also as a result. I don't think I talked about it too much in the book because I wasn't as aware of it back then. But remember we were talking about the vagus nerve.
Yes.
If you get vagus nerve malfunction, then the vagus nerve also through its impulses directs the stomach and the cells in the intestine to release enzymes. So you get vagus nerve.
So you need the vagus nerve activity for proper digestion.
You need vagal. They call it vagal tone.
Okay.
It's almost like it needs that signal coming down from the brain through the vagus into the digestive system. So if you have vagal nerve dysfunction, which can happen from brain injury, but it can also happen from just being stressed all the time.
That's interesting.
Then have you ever been stressed and you find you can't digest food well?
Yeah, I can't eat if I'm stressed out. I can't, you know what I mean?
So your vagus nerve goes offline and becomes dysfunctional. So the way to get it back is to get back into parasympathetic activity, meditation, breathing. You can use biofeedback devices. There's a lot of different ways you can gargle to get the vagus nerve to function.
Gargling, again. Just regular gargling with water?
Gargling with water, but you want to do it probably anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds. And you do it for as long as it takes to get a tear in your eye. And if you ever gargle and you get like a tear in your eye.
That's never happened to me. But when you do that, it activates the vagus nerve?
When you get a tear in your eye, it's activated the lacrimal nerve, but it's the external sign that you know, okay, my vagus fired.
Well, and I also want to say this. In the book, you have a whole section in the back where you list supplements that you suggest. You list companies that are reputable, that have reputable pharmaceutical grade supplements.
And I do think it's very important to know where you're sourcing your supplements. Right. Now, there's so many plethora of supplement companies out there. It's almost impossible to keep up.
But you do list them, and so and I like that because I think a lot of people they get nervous about buying supplements because we've been told you can't trust what's on the label. Let me see. So let's get to Restore. Okay, so the Restore of the R of care. And I also have a question from a woman on Facebook. So
Restore is about basically restoring the gut microbiome. And we do that through probiotics, so we can use a probiotic supplement, but also very importantly through prebiotics, which can be taken as a prebiotic nutrient or as a vegetable as well. So a lot of vegetables, fibers, non-digestible fibers are prebiotic nutrients for the gut bacteria.
Yeah, you talk about that.
So they're almost like fish food. Yeah. So insoluble fibers, like most people know, like as green salads.
Yeah.
And soluble fibers, for example, like in apples, like pectin, and in oats as well.
You even say in the book, don't get all stressed out about whether it's soluble or insoluble. Just get more fiber because you say in the book, most of us get about 10 grams a day, but ideally a woman would have 25 and a man would have at least 35.
Yes.
Now, okay, so again, Restore is using probiotics and prebiotics, which feed the probiotics to re-inoculate the intestines with friendly flora. Now, Marlene on Facebook, when I told my followers on Facebook that I was interviewing you, they were really excited. Marlene wants to know, how do I know which probiotic to buy? There's just so many out there. People get really overwhelmed. Can I tell you which one I use? I think you'll like it.
That's a tough one.
I use by Allergy Research Group, which you talk about that company in the book. It's a great company. Allergy Research Group, Bifidobiotics. It's got a lot of different strains. That's the one I use.
I think sometimes it's good to look for ones that have a variety of strains.
Okay.
But the honest truth is that not every probiotic is going to be right for every person. Okay. One thing I would say is I have a Mind Body Green post where I talk about, how do you choose a probiotic, and talking about the different, like looking at the strains like lactobacillus, bifido. Yeah. You might want a probiotic that has, multiple lactobacillus strains, bifido strains, and then a Saccharomyces in there. Mm-hmm. And also maybe a strep Thermophilus that's often included in probiotic supplements. But a lot of what I do in my practice is targeted probiotic therapy depending on what the patient is coming in for.
Okay, so in other words, like you would determine that as a doctor via what, stool sample?
You might do a stool sample, but honestly, I have to say that I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg in understanding that. I just met a really fascinating company that they sent me a kit. I still have to send it in, but they do stool sampling and then for genetic analysis of the stool to determine what types of bacteria you have in there.
Okay.
And depending on the bacteria, they design a probiotic for you through your stool sample.
Oh, so it's customized probiotics.
Yeah.
So if we were going to answer Marlene just as a general answer, how do I know which probiotics to buy? I would guide her toward buying something that requires refrigeration.
It could or it couldn't. It depends on how the probiotic is designed and the company. Okay. Some of them don't, although refrigeration extends the shelf life.
Okay.
If the probiotic is in a nitrogen-sealed pack, so it's a blister pack where you pop it out, it's protected from oxygen. It's not going to deteriorate, and it can actually be fine for travel and at room temperature. So for my patients who travel, I like them to have that type of probiotic because it's just easier.
But for general thought, you would suggest many different strains for variety. That would be
always better because diversity is the key to health.
Okay.
Yeah, unless there is some underlying issues. So, for example, if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth,
SIBO,
then you don't want, at least while you're symptomatic, you're not going to want a broad probiotic because you might not want too many bacteria in there because you already have bacteria in the wrong place. So for patients with SIBO, a lot of times I use a special probiotic called a spore-based probiotic. So it's a different strains of bacteria from the regular probiotic strains. And what they do is they outcompete the overgrowth
in the small intestine.
Yeah. So they can help with that, and they also help with leaky gut. So it depends on if someone's really constipated, it's good you can even just get a bifido-based probiotic, like the different bifidobacterium strains. And those can help with peristalsis, with helping improve. But the key is to remember that it's not just about the probiotic, it's about eating the right foods. So getting fermented foods in your diet. I am eating some form of sauerkraut. You know, they have all these different fancy sauerkrauts now with turmeric and ginger and dill. And so I'm always adding some sort of fermented food at least a couple of times a week.
And we should say the sauerkraut to which you're referring is the kind that requires refrigeration. I just want people to know that. It's the kind
exactly. Because otherwise it's going to keep fermenting and then it's going to get really rancid on you.
Now, I want to get to the final step because we're out of time. The E, care, cleanse, activate, restore. E is enhance, repair, regenerate, and heal the intestinal lining.
This is a very important step because if you do everything else but you don't work on repairing the lining, then you can't get past. You need to get into the healing stage.
Okay.
So this is about using nutrients that we know are healing to the gut mucosa, like DGL, which is from licorice,
L-glutamine,
or L-glutamine, which is an amino acid, has been very well studied and helps reverse the leaky gut, especially in the small intestine. And there's another one, glycine, which is very high in collagen or like in bone broth. Bone broth can be very healing as well for the gut lining. But glycine is cellular protective, so it helps the cells heal themselves.
And again, I don't want people to feel overwhelmed. You list all of that in the book.
All of that is there.
That's why I said I think this book is best read in two ways. I read it from top to bottom because I wanted to get the gist of it, obviously because I'm interviewing you. But I think also you need to go back to it, and because there are lists and
I kind of wrote, the way I wrote the book is I thought this is going to be
a reference.
I wanted it to be a program that people could do, and then also be a reference that you could go back to and be like, well, what did he say about this? Or what nutrient is good for this? That's what I wanted this book to be, something that people would want to keep on their shelf after they read, because they're going to want to go back to it for reference.
You accomplished that. And again, I enjoyed reading it first from cover to cover because I wanted to get like an overview of all of your philosophy.
I really appreciate that because you know that I have a chapter on the gut-brain connection, but I also talk a lot about like cleansing the mind of negativity and
you talk about
bringing gratitude and yoga and breathing and meditation and how important that is in healing the gut. And like I said in the beginning, it's the third pillar. So it's diet, nutrition, the right supplements, and then stress management.
Mind management, really, because you don't want to be a negative, angry ass person. Yeah. This is, we're out of time. I love this book. You guys, it's time for the Tara Marie's tip. And I always give a little tip at the end. And after going through this whole book and also living the life I've lived and finding some of the issues in my own life, I wanted to just give this tip that I am completely of the belief that we're able to achieve optimal health when we really take an active role in our own wellness. We're at the point now where if you believe that you can rely on a doctor to know your body better than you do, I think at this point you're really missing a huge piece of the puzzle, because you live in your body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can really be your own health detective. So I would encourage you, and this is what Dr. Pedre encourages in the book, start paying really close attention to how you feel both physically and mentally. And when something feels off, backtrack your steps and think about what you've had to eat, what you've had to drink, the air you've breathed, products you've used on your body, things you've been exposed to like chemicals in perfumes or cleaning products. Prescription medications you've taken, things like this, and track down what may be connected to your current mental and physical state. Because you see, for every effect, there is a cause. You may not make the connection right away, but for every single effect, there's a cause. And if you track your symptoms and your exposures, then you can actually partner with your doctor, and the whole process of achieving optimal health actually happens faster. I can tell you this, and I've said it before on the show, my health really improved when I stopped relying on any one doctor to fix me, and I decided that I would get educated and get very acquainted with my body and how I was feeling in connection to everything to which I was exposed. You don't need a medical degree. I don't have any kind of medical degree, but you can be your own health detective. You just have to be very keenly aware of everything. Awareness in life is the beginning of optimal physical and mental health. And you corroborate that in the book. I genuinely loved this book, Doctor. Bravo. This was a great book.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you. No, I so agree with what you just said.
Well, like I said, I'm 53 years old. I've been very sick in my life, and no doctor ever fixed me. I had to say, wait, hold up. Hold up. I'm going to take control here because no one lives with me 24 hours a day. And I decided I would help my doctors help me. I'm done relying on doctors.
And that's what the way I approach medicine is, that it's a collaborative.
Yeah.
It's really a collaboration between doctor and patient. It's not the old paternalistic, like, come in and you take this drug and this is going to make you better.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
No. The optimal health, like the wellness that people really are thirsty for now, that is a collaborative process.
Amen. And you're very clear about that in this book. This is a great book. You guys, that's all for today. If you're hearing this episode as a podcast and you want to watch the video, go to youtube.com/Tamari Live. Look for the video entitled Happy Gut with guest Dr. Vincent Pedre. You can also access my YouTube channel right from my website, tamari.com. I want to thank my guest. This has been such a pleasure, Dr. Vincent Pedre. For more information, visit happygutlife.com, happygutlife.com. I encourage you, when you're there, you can pick up a copy of Happy Gut. There are different online retailers there, or you can also get it on Amazon.com. I encourage you to get this book, read it from cover to cover. You'll be glad you did. Please rate and review Tamari Live on iTunes, and be sure to subscribe to Tamari Live so you never miss an episode. You can subscribe using iTunes or whichever podcast app you want to use right from my website, tamari.com. That's TARAMARIE.com. And there you'll find all episodes of Tamari Live. So you can get them while you're there, and sign up for my mailing list, because when you get my newsletter with Tamari's tips, you'll also get information about the latest episode of the show, so you'll keep in touch with what's going on with the show. Please connect with me on social media. On Facebook and Instagram, it's @Tamari Live, and on Twitter, it's @Tamari_live. Make better choices today than you did yesterday, and you'll always be moving in the right direction. Peace out. God bless you, and thanks to Dr. Vincent Pedre.